But I think everyone in this band and people who have been and gone, so to speak, have passed through Fleetwood Mac.
Mick Fleetwood turned 78 this year. For decades, he kept the darkest secrets of Fleetwood Mac locked away. But now, he's finally talking. The affairs that destroyed friendships, the cocaine that cost him $60 million, the betrayal that made Stevie Nicks ban someone from the studio. In March 2025, something happened that shocked everyone. Mick and Lindsey Buckingham were back in the studio together. What they discussed wasn't just music. It was the truth about what really tore the band apart, and why Stevie might never forgive him. Mick Fleetwood was born on June 24, 1947, in Redruth, Cornwall. His father was a Royal Air Force Wing commander, which meant Mick was raised in a world shaped by constant movement and military discipline. Even though he was born in peaceful England, his early years were anything but quiet. Just 2 years after World War II, Britain was still recovering, and Mick's family was always being transferred. By the time Mick was 4, the family had moved to Egypt. For the next 6 years, they lived through events like the Egyptian Revolution in 1952 and the Suez Crisis in 1956. Mick lived the culture every day. He picked up the sounds, the rhythm, and the atmosphere of a land completely different from England. These years gave him an unconscious connection to non-Western music, especially percussion. Long before he became a drummer, he had already internalized the complex beats and layered sounds of Egyptian street music. That influence would quietly resurface years later in the way he played. After Egypt, his family relocated again, this time to Norway. Mick was around 10 years old. His father had been assigned there through NATO. Mick enrolled in local schools and learned to speak fluent Norwegian. Though he later forgot the language, his full immersion shaped how he adapted to new environments. Norway's long winters and dramatic light patterns added something else to his view of the world. He began to understand mood and space in a different way. That understanding later came through in his music, especially in how he created atmosphere with rhythm. The isolation of Norway also made him more self-reliant and gave him a comfort with silence that most kids never learn. School, however, was a struggle. Mick had severe dyslexia, and it left him frustrated and misunderstood. He failed tests, even though he was clearly bright and creative. Teachers were often confused. He knew the answers, but couldn't memorize anything in the traditional way. He once broke down crying under a tree, asking God to get him out of that place. At 13, his parents gave him a drum kit, a small set made by Gigster. That gift changed everything. He taught himself to play in the attic, practicing to Everly Brothers and Cliff Richard records. With no formal training, Mick developed a natural, instinctive approach. What started as therapy became a calling. Creativity ran through his family. His father wrote poetry and played drums for fun. His sister Susan became an actress, and his other sister Sally explored sculpture. Mick was part of that same creative stream. When he was 12, he built a fake nightclub in a barn behind their house in Gloucestershire. He called it Club Keller. He set up lights, made a stage, and imagined it full of people. Years later, he opened a real venue in Maui called Fleetwood's on Front Street, and he traced the idea directly back to that barn. That childhood fantasy wasn't just pretend. It was a vision. He already understood that music was about creating a world people could step into. At 15, Mick dropped out of school. He was failing and miserable. His family, surprisingly, supported the decision. They believed in him, especially after seeing how he'd connected with music. They bought him a better drum kit, and he moved to London to chase the dream. He didn't have a car, but he bought a second-hand taxi. It became his band van. People started hiring him not just because he could play, but because he showed up with real drums and could transport them himself. That made him valuable. He slept on the floor of his sister Sally's place in Notting Hill, and started inserting himself into the local scene. Things started moving fast. Within a year of arriving in London, a musician named Peter Bardens, who lived just a few doors away, offered him a gig. Bardens needed a drummer for his band, the Cheneys. It was 1963, and Mick was only 16. Almost immediately, they were opening for acts like the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds. They even appeared in a short film in 1965 called Mods and Rockers, where a young, long-haired Mick can be seen drumming. He had officially entered the world of rock and roll, and he hadn't even turned 18 yet. After that, he joined the Bow Street Runners in 1966. The band had already won a major contest 2 years earlier on a TV show called Ready, Steady, Win, a competition designed to discover the next Beatles. They had scored a recording contract and $1,000 in prize money. Their single, I'm a Bow Street Runner, had sold over 20,000 copies. When Mick joined, they were still riding that success. But bad luck struck. When they released a promising follow-up single that was expected to climb the charts, a workers' strike at the record-pressing plant meant only a small number of copies were made. The song stalled, and the momentum faded. For Mick, though, it was another step forward. Then came the turning point. In April 1967, he got a chance to audition for John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. The band was the heart of Britain's blues scene, and it was a huge opportunity. Mick was terrified during the audition, but he landed the job. He was now playing with top-tier musicians, including bassist John McVie. The two became close. But the good times didn't last. Mick's drinking got out of control, and he was eventually fired for showing up drunk to gigs. Still, the experience gave him something no school ever could. Mayall's band was like a blues university. Mick was learning from the greats, absorbing everything from John Lee Hooker to Muddy Waters. He was becoming more than just a drummer. He was becoming a blues man. That firing ended up being the start of something much bigger. In April 1967, something small and unexpected changed music history forever. John Mayall gifted Peter Green a bit of free studio time. Green used it to record 5 songs with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. The 5th track was a simple instrumental. He named it Fleetwood Mac, almost as an afterthought. But that small track planted the seed for one of the biggest bands in the world. Green then formed a new group in July and named it Fleetwood Mac, hoping it would convince McVie to leave Mayall and join. At first, McVie said no. He wanted the stability of a steady paycheck, so Green brought in Bob Brunning as a temporary bassist. Just a few weeks later, McVie changed his mind and joined for good. The band made their first appearance on August 13, 1967, at the National Jazz and Blues Festival under the name Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, featuring Jeremy Spencer. Their first album came out in February 1968 and did something few ever expected. Without a single hit song, the record still reached number 4 on the UK charts and stayed there for 37 weeks. It sold over 1 million copies in the UK, even though it never received official certification. It didn't rely on radio play or media hype. It grew through word of mouth and the band's raw live shows. The album blended blues covers with original tracks, including Long Grey Mare and Shake Your Moneymaker. In the US, the album barely made a dent, peaking at number 198 on the Billboard chart. The early sessions began in September 1967 with Brunning, but by November, McVie had joined and completed the album. Its quiet success proved that real talent could still rise without flashy marketing. By the end of 1968, 2 new faces changed everything. First came 18-year-old Danny Kirwan. Green had seen him play in a boiler room with his band, Boiler House. Green was so impressed, he offered them a support slot. But when the others refused to go pro, Green placed an ad for a new guitarist. Over 300 applied, but no one matched Kirwan. Green simply invited him to join as their third guitarist. Then came Christine Perfect. She had just been voted Best Female Vocalist by Melody Maker readers and was still in Chicken Shack. She played keyboards on the band's second album as a guest. Later that year, Fleetwood Mac released Albatross. With Green and Kerwin trading lead guitar, the song became their first #1 hit across Europe. Green later said that without Danny, the song would never have worked. In August 1968, they released their second album, Mr. Wonderful. It was recorded live in studio using real amplifiers and a PA system, which gave it a raw, live feel. Christine Perfect also contributed keyboards, even though she wasn't a full member yet. The album marked a shift from strict blues, including songs like Stop Messin' Round. Surprisingly, the Beatles took notice and even considered signing Fleetwood Mac to their Apple label. But their manager, Clifford Davis, turned down the offer. Instead, the band signed with Warner Brothers through Reprise Records, where they've stayed ever since. This was also when their label troubles began. They left Blue Horizon and briefly joined Immediate Records, which had financial problems. It forced them to search again for a stable record deal. September 1969 brought another big change. The album Then Play On signaled their shift into psychedelic rock. It was a bold step away from blues, and it worked. The album reached #4 in the UK, with its lead track, Oh Well, climbing to #2. Danny Kerwin's contributions stood alongside Peter Green's, creating a new sound. Around the same time, the band flew to Chicago to record at Chess Records with blues legends like Willie Dixon, Buddy Guy, and Otis Spann. The mix of blues and psychedelia gave the album an edge that helped define their new direction. Rattlesnake Shake, written by Green, stood out. The album proved they weren't stuck in one genre and could evolve into something much bigger. But then came disaster. In March 1970, Peter Green went to a party in Munich while the band was touring Europe. The party was held at a commune rumored to be part of a cult. Green took LSD there, much stronger than anything he had before. Some think his drink was spiked. He came back, changed. According to their manager, Green started talking about money like it was evil. He even wanted to give away all of the band's earnings. Within 2 months, he left the band entirely. He was later diagnosed with schizophrenia and went through electroconvulsive therapy. His departure was a painful loss right when the band was finally finding success. In August 1970, just 10 days before their U.S. tour, Christine McVie officially joined the band. She had retired from music a year earlier after leaving Chicken Shack to focus on her marriage to John McVie, but she had already played on several Fleetwood Mac albums as a session musician. On the Kiln House album, she contributed vocals, keyboards, and even drew the cover art. The album came out in September and marked a turning point. With Christine in the band, they began to move toward a more melodic, mainstream sound. Her presence helped fill the gap left by Peter Green, both musically and emotionally. She later remembered that all it took was one casual question. "Hey, Chris, do you want to join?" And just like that, she was in. Then, in February 1971, Jeremy Spencer disappeared. He left his hotel in Los Angeles saying he was going to a bookstore. He never came back. The band had a show scheduled at the Whiskey A Go Go, but Spencer was gone. After 5 days of searching, the FBI finally found him. He had joined a religious group called the Children of God. When the band saw him again, his head was shaved, and he had a new name. Mick Fleetwood described him as a zombie who kept mumbling, "Jesus loves you." Spencer said he had been feeling lost, and a street musician invited him to their center. The cult was later labeled as one of the most abusive in American history. Bob Welch was brought in to replace him. Despite losing 2 founding members, Fleetwood Mac kept moving. In September 1971, they released Future Games, their 5th album. It sounded completely different. The blues was gone. Instead, they embraced melodic rock and vocal harmonies. This new direction didn't chart in the UK, but found an audience in America. The single Dragonfly introduced their evolving sound. By the end of the year, CBS released their first greatest hits album in Europe. The new version of the band, now led by Welch and Christine McVie, began building the foundation for future success. In 1972, they released Bare Trees, which featured Welch's Sentimental Lady and Christine's Spare Me a Little of Your Love. Both songs became fan favorites in their live shows. Future Games was a quiet pivot, but it reshaped their path forever. The album introduced Bob Welch, who brought an R&B and jazz background that made the band's sound softer and more polished. It also marked the first full album with Christine McVie as an official member. It peaked at number 91 on the US Billboard chart and eventually went gold in 2000 with over 500,000 copies sold. But that same year, Danny Kirwan hit a wall. He had been with the band since he was 18, writing and recording non-stop. By 1972, the pressure got to him. He was drinking heavily and barely eating. During a tour, he isolated himself from everyone. Then, before a show, he smashed his guitar and refused to perform. The band held a meeting back at the hotel. They let him go. It was sad and unavoidable. Bob Welch later recalled seeing Kirwan in a bar after the firing. Kirwan sarcastically wished him luck and added, "You're gonna need it." The band lost 2 weeks of shows and had to cancel parts of the tour. Kirwan's exit was the last piece of their original core to fall apart. In 1974, more drama hit. Guitarist Bob Weston was fired after having an affair with Mick Fleetwood's wife, Jenny Boyd. She was already struggling with addiction and trying to raise kids, while Fleetwood was often absent and using cocaine. The betrayal crushed him. The band released Heroes Are Hard to Find in September. It hit number 34 on the Billboard chart, their best yet, but the tour fell apart. Many venues were barely half full. Tensions boiled over in Las Vegas when Welch yelled at John McVie on stage over a mistake. Welch quit as soon as the tour ended. The band was close to collapse. When Fleetwood Mac released their self-titled album in 1975, no one could have predicted how far it would go. It took 58 weeks